Can you imagine waking up one day to find a giant metal structure being built on your own property without anyone even asking you? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. And let me tell you, the story of how I dealt with my overbearing homeowners association is one you won't want to miss. It all started a few years ago. I own a nice piece of land, a few acres on the edge of the Oak Ridge subdivision. It's my little slice of peace and quiet. One morning, I'm sipping my coffee, looking out the window, and I see construction crews on my field. I nearly dropped my mug. I marched right out there and asked them what in the world was going on. The foreman, looking a bit confused, showed me a work order signed by none other than my HOA president, Brenda Yates. Her name was actually Brenda. The work order was for the installation of a new cell phone tower. I was furious. I stormed over to the HOA office, which is really just Brenda's dining room, and confronted her. She was completely unfazed. She told me, with this smug little smile, that the HOA board had voted to approve the tower. Because the neighborhood had poor cell reception, she claimed a clause in the HOA bylaws gave them the right to make necessary improvements on common and adjacent properties for the benefit of the community. My field, she argued, was adjacent. I told her that was ridiculous, that they couldn't just build whatever they wanted on my private land. She basically told me to take it up with the board, but that the decision was final, and the construction was moving forward. I felt completely powerless. Here was this group of neighbors, led by this power-tripping president, just steamrolling me. I knew I had to do something, but a legal battle sounded expensive and exhausting. So I went home fuming. I spent the next few days watching this metal monstrosity grow taller and taller on my beautiful field. Every time I looked at it, my blood boiled. But then, as I was rereading the HOA bylaws for the 10th time, trying to find a loophole, an idea sparked. It was a long shot, but it was brilliant. You see, the land wasn't just in my name. A few years back, for tax purposes, my lawyer had advised me to place the property into a limited liability company, an LLC. I was the sole owner and manager of the LLC, but legally, the land belonged to the company, not to me as an individual. And this little detail was about to become Brenda's worst nightmare. I waited. I let them finish the entire tower. Took about 2 weeks. The day after the last worker packed up and left, I put my plan into action. I drafted an official invoice on my newly created LLC letterhead. The invoice was addressed to the HOA. The item description was simple. Land lease for telecommunications tower, first month's rent, and the price, $5,000. I hand-delivered it to Brenda's house and dropped it in her mailbox. I wish I could have seen her face when she opened it. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was Brenda, and she was screaming. She was yelling about how I couldn't do this, how it was outrageous, how the HOA had the right to use the land. I let her finish her tirade, and then I calmly explained the situation. I said, "Brenda, you're absolutely right. The HOA bylaws might allow you to make improvements on an adjacent property owned by a resident. However, you didn't build a tower on my property. You built it on land owned by a private corporation, my LLC. And that corporation, which I manage, has no obligation whatsoever to your HOA. You trespassed and built a structure on corporate property. So, you have two options. You can either pay the monthly lease of $5,000, or you can pay to have the tower disassembled and removed, and then compensate my company for damages to the land." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, as she realized she had been completely outplayed. She sputtered something about talking to the HOA's lawyer and hung up. The next week was tense. I heard through the grapevine that there was an emergency HOA meeting. Apparently, the HOA's lawyer confirmed everything I said. They had built their precious tower on land owned by a corporate entity, not a private resident, and the bylaws she was so proud of didn't apply. They were caught. They had a choice. pay my company's rent, or spend a fortune tearing the tower down. Guess what they chose? A few days later, a check for $5,000 arrived in my mailbox, made out to my LLC, and it's been arriving every single month since. They tried to negotiate a lower rate. Of course, I told them the price was non-negotiable. In fact, I mentioned that due to market rate fluctuations, the rent would be subject to a 10% increase every year. They had no choice but to agree. So now, the HOA that tried to bully me is my best paying tenant. That ugly cell tower that I hated so much. It's now my personal ATM, paying me a very handsome sum every month. All because they didn't do their homework. The best part is, cell service in the neighborhood is fantastic now, and I get to smile every time I look out at that tower, knowing it's funding my vacations. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting angry, it's getting smart. And that's the story of how I turned a massive headache into a massive payday. If you've got a crazy HOA story, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Karen Conflict for more stories about getting one over on the people who think they can push you around. Thanks for watching.